Hello everyone. Today I wanted to talk to you all about Sedona, Arizona, Arizona's coolest desert, which yes, I am well aware that this is a horrible excuse for a play on words because Sedona, like any desert, gets hot, but I'll use any excuse for a corny dad joke. However, all jokes aside, Sedona is a geographical wonderland featuring historical, geological, and natural beauty not seen anywhere else in the world. With desert and forest combined, there is quite literally something for everyone within this relatively small city. So, let's get started. Before we dive in, let's talk objectives. To give you a brief geographical overview, I wanted to touch on topics such as the geological history, current topography, and that of some of the area's earliest inhabitants. I'll briefly touch on current census data as well as local weather, climate, and how such is changing. So, moving right along. Firstly, I wanted to discuss the geology and topography of Sedona, of which is quite extensive and detailed. However, I have attempted to condense it down into quite simple terms for time's sake. Sedona sits approximately 4,500 feet above sea level at the base of the Mogollon Rim, which is the result of volcanic activity that took place approximately 80 million years ago. The eruptions from such left behind layers of lava basalt being the dark, fine-grained volcanic rock that sometimes displays as a columnar structure, which is the quite recognizable features displayed amongst many of the rock formations across Sedona. Now, the natural next step of this process was that of erosion, which over time exposed sandstone, and sandstone erodes quite quickly, and thus nature itself carved the intricate canyons and rock formations, creating what we now know as the Verde Valley. According to one source, the centrally located natural phenomenon runs northwest to southeast through the state, spanning 714 square miles, essentially the very heart of Sedona itself. However, this really only explains the incredible rock formations throughout the area. But where does that vibrant red rock and dirt come from? The simple answer is rust. According to Sedona.net, the red color in the rock comes from iron that was trapped in seawater. Once exposed after the erosion process, the rocks basically just started to rust. And therein lies the mystery, or mysteries rather, of the beauty that makes up the scenic city. All that being said, how does one see any number of these ancient, breathtaking sights and colors? Well, the best option, in my personal opinion, is by hiking. According to alltrails.com, there are over 245 hiking trails where one can see any variation of the rusty red, lava basalt littered canyon. I have listed a handful of the more popular, well-known ones on this slide. However, I myself have only had the pleasure of visiting Bell Rock, Courthouse Butte, and Devil's Bridge. I've included photographs on a later slide that I'll share with you all. If you're not a fan of hiking, though, there are other options such as biking, jeep tours, and more. The options truly are limitless. However, say that you are on more of a spiritual journey. There are also vortexes in the area. Now, if you have never heard of a vortex before, visit Sedona.com explains it well by stating, Sedona vortexes are thought to be swirling centers of the Earth's energy emanating all around us. This energy is said to be conducive to healing, meditation, and self-discovery. Supposedly, these places are bridges between the realm of nature, spirits, and mankind. The earth here is alive. Many feel inspired, recharged, or uplifted after visiting a vortex. Practitioners familiar with the workings of the vortexes speak of how our intentions are amplified by the phenomenon. Personally, I have never visited one of the vortex sites, but I hear they are quite the magical experience. According to some sources, there are 7 vortexes in the area. However, many would argue that there are only 4 main sites for such to experience the spiritual oneness with nature. Lastly, I wanted to briefly touch on the water sources within the area. With it being a desert, we don't always think about water. However, such creeks, such as Oak Creek Canyon, which is the primary creek that runs right through the center of town, as well as Clear Creek to the west, which you will see on a map within the next couple of slides, as well as a map of the major vortex sites as well. Here are a couple of the maps referenced within the previous slide that I wanted to share of the area. The first on the left is that of the Sedona vortex map, which includes all the vortex sites in the area, And the second map on the right is just a city map that includes everything from shopping, hiking, land formations, Oak Creek Canyon, you name it, it is likely listed within this unique map. Here is another city map, much like the one on the previous slide. However, this one appears to be hand-drawn by a local artist, and I simply had to share because of its uniqueness. Now that we've discussed how Sedona in its ancient form came to be, let's talk early inhabitants. Sedona did not officially become a city until 1902. However, some of the area's earliest inhabitants were there long before. One such group is that of the Sinagua people. The Sinagua peoples are believed to have lived in the area from approximately 600 AD to 1400 AD, before they sort of just disappeared, though archaeologists and anthropologists now believe that it is most likely they simply assimilated into other surrounding tribes within the area. So, what exactly do we know about these early inhabitants? Well, archaeological and anthropological evidence suggests that they were farmers, hunters, and irrigators. But most surprisingly of all, they could technically be considered somewhat unique architects as well. I say this because of their choice and style of dwelling, cliff dwelling to be more specific, as they resided in what we now know as Montezuma Castle. However, it should be noted that this cliffside dwelling was inaccurately named after Chief Montezuma of the Aztecs, as that was the initial, be it incorrect, belief of their origins, which I have included photographs on a later slide. Also of note in regard to the Sinagua is that of their language. It is believed that there was no official written language for the peoples. However, there are petroglyphs located within the area, as you can see pictured below, that suggest they had some form of spiritual and or religious structure. And also of geographical note is that of the Sinagua people's primary water source, Montezuma Well, which also was inaccurately named, especially since this well significantly predates the Sinagua. Technically, the two sites, castle and well, were only connected once the Sinagua people had arrived. However, this well flows southwestward into the creek, which flowed directly beneath their cliff-dwelling home, though it wasn't unusual for them to make the 11-mile trek north-northeast to the well site for one reason or another, which I have also included photographs of the well site on a later slide. Here are the photos of Montezuma Castle I've included from my personal photos that I took during a trip to Montezuma Castle National Monument. On the left is just a picture of the castle itself that gives you a better idea of how far off the ground it actually was, which is approximately 100 feet above the floodplain. To the right, I have included a picture of the creek area that sits at the base of the castle, and this is where the well would draw water into. And here are the pictures of Montezuma Well. Sadly, on my numerous trips, I've always managed to miss visiting this particular site. However, I was able to locate a couple of pictures online. The left one is clearly just a picture of the well itself, but in the right photograph, you can see that there was also a cliff dwelling located above the well site too, though much less expansive and elaborate as the castle. So we've discussed early inhabitants. Now let's talk current. On this slide here, I have included a table of 2023 census data reflecting the different races and ethnicities within the city, as well as population density. The most important thing I wanted to highlight here is that of population density, and for good reason. As of 2023, census data reflects just under 10,000 people reside within the city. However, Sedona is a well-known tourist destination, so I would argue that the data doesn't truly reflect the number of people you might encounter on any given day. For instance, though the population reflects only around 9,800 people, Sedona Chamber of Commerce notates that the city sees approximately 3 million tourists each year. However, let me just add, do not let this dissuade you from ever trying to visit. Now let's talk climate. All those people, tourists, has to impact climate, right? Especially a climate that is already prone to hotter temperatures, simply based on the desert area. So let's discuss. On this slide, I have included two graphs that do reflect changing climate. The one on the left reflects yearly changes in temperatures, and on the right, yearly changes in precipitation. As you can see reflected, over the course of 45 years, the temperature has increased while precipitation has decreased. However, it would seem that Sedona is quite aware of the significant effects of climate change in their area because back in 2023, Sedona, along with 18 other communities, joined in a nationwide action plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 50% by the year 2030. All that aside, if simply discussing the weather, currently average high temperatures range upwards of 100 degrees Fahrenheit, with average lows dipping below freezing. And I would add that unlike Oklahoma, the air is dry, so hot, yes, but suffocating and muggy, no. And they kind of have seasonal weather changes like we do, because in the wintertime, you can see snow upon the rocky red rock formations. As promised, here are a few photographs of Sedona that I personally have taken on my adventures. I am no photographer, nor do I claim to be, but the photos speak for themselves in terms of scenic beauty. In the top left, you can see Devil's Bridge, which stands approximately 54 feet tall and 45 feet long. You can walk out on it, which I have done, and it is quite exhilarating, to say the least. Just below that is a simple photograph of the landscape at the base of Bell Rock, featuring the picturesque red dirt. In the center is Bell Rock itself, with the Coconino National Forest sign at its base. In the top right photo is an at-a-distance glance of Cathedral Rock, another important hiking trail, which I have yet to hike. This photograph was actually taken on the trail surrounding Bell Rock. The bottom right photo was taken from the same trail and is just another incredible example of the red rock formations that litter the area. This too was taken at a considerable distance, which truly speaks of the size of the formation itself. And lastly, I just wanted to include this incredible unedited photograph of the Sedona sunrise while on Bell Rock Loop Trail. Whether you are a morning person or not, if you ever do visit this beautiful city, I encourage you to get out and see the sunrise. In summation, I hope that you are able to see through this semi-brief presentation that Sedona is not simply another city in Arizona, nor is it just another desert in the American Southwest, but that it is a geological anomaly rich with history, heart, character, and most importantly of all, beauty to be witnessed and experienced by all. Thank you.